today's topic is very close to our hearts at the Rebay Group. When we look at investments and we look at companies that we potentially want to invest in, oftentimes kind of a common trait that runs through those is a really strong and passionate entrepreneur and, you know, a really deep level of skills. So, you know, we believe that needs to be, you know, the breadth of that needs to be increased in this country. So yeah, we're very excited to be a part of it, and yeah, we thank all of you guys for joining us today as well. Let me just introduce Louise. She's asked to keep it short, but I think it's important that we understand the background to her program and to herself. So Louise describes herself as a social entrepreneur, and she believes that the world's huge intractable problems can be solved through cross-sector collaboration and a solid understanding of complex social change. Her approach to change is shaped with more than 30 years of working as an organizational change and leadership development practitioner. She holds a doctorate in complex social change and has founded a few entrepreneurial organizations. In 2008, she returned home from South Africa after living in Europe, and in 2010, she launched the Partners for Possibility, which was a creative solution to SA's education crisis. Business leaders that are involved develop their capacity to lead in a complex and unfamiliar environment, becoming a co-learning and a co-action partner to a school principal. The focus on the partnership is to lead positive change in an under-resourced school, of which make up the majority of the schools in South Africa. Leaders report that they learn more about leadership from working with a school in an under-resourced community than attending a course at a business school. The Partners for Possibility program facilitates cross-sectoral reciprocal partnerships between business, government, and the social sector. And I know it's something that our president has spoken about a lot, about the social pact that's so important to moving our economy forward. To date, the program has impacted more than 700 schools, 20,000 teachers, and 600,000 learners. And if you'll just indulge me for a little bit longer, just some of the awards that they've recently been bestowed upon. They were one of 6 winners of the Worldwide Innovation Summit for Excellence, and they were the recipient of the Chairman's Guardian of Governance, created by the Institute of International Auditors for South Africa. So if we're ready there, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome our speaker, Dr. Louise van Rhyn.
2008 was my year of lots of engagement with amazing people, reigniting the conversation of possibility, really getting excited about what might be possible in this country. But I had no idea what would we actually do? How would we fix our education system? What would we? And then Tutu came around and he called for a wealth tax. And lots of people wanted to run away. But there was a part of me that says, well, maybe what he's asking for is not for our money. Maybe he's asking for us to give something of ourselves. Maybe there's something about our gifts and our talents and our knowledge and our skills that we can share as people who have been incredibly privileged. Can I just see, who in the room would see themselves as privileged? Can I just kind of get an idea? Yeah, exactly. We are all incredibly privileged. So what can we share without it making too much, costing us too much? So, and my question was, what can I do? So I wasn't even wondering about what you could all do. I was asking myself, what could I do? I'm white, I'm privileged, I'm well educated, I'm a woman, which let's not imagine that that's not an issue. I'm a woman, and I have no struggle credentials, and my background is in business. And business is that bad thing that just wants to make money. And so I was really grappling with what do I do, what can I play, what can I contribute? And then I did a course, I did a Meridian, the Common Purpose as a program, Meridian, and I was part of this program, and we happened to meet Professor Brian O'Connell, who was then the Vice-Chancellor of University of the Western Cape. And he was doing a presentation to us around why education has to be the most important thing, the thing that we pay attention to. And he showed these slides. So the first one we recognize. The second one is now we're looking at primary education, and then secondary education and tertiary education and science research. Look what happens to South Africa. Wealth growth, and this is the one where the CEOs start to pay attention. And we were talking about the fact that there's been many, many, many years of investment in education and very little outcomes. Our kids still can't read. And this picture that you may have seen from Nick's Paul that says that 100 children start grade 1, 60 of them write matric, 37 pass matric, 12 go to university, and 4 get a degree within 6 years of finishing matric. 4 out of 100. That's heartbreaking. So I went home that day and, oh my goodness, we have to do something. And this is recent, so the recent results, Pearl's results says that 78% of the grade 4s in our country cannot read for meaning. So if you can't read for meaning in grade 4, you cannot finish matric well, you cannot go to university, it's just not possible. You may finish matric because they've given you 30% pass, but you can't do anything. We're not going to employ them. So back to that question around what can I do? I have no struggle credentials, I'm not an educator. And then I realized that I was getting myself into a complete pit with all this, how I can't do anything, because I realized I have some gifts, I have something to share. I do have many years of experience of a leadership and organizational development consultant. I have a doctoral degree in complexity. I have a can-do attitude. I have a mindset of possibility. I know how to get stuff done. I have a strong network. Maybe I could use all that stuff. Now, if I ask you what are your gifts, if you had to make the list of what you have to offer, we have an amazing asset base in this room. And so I then thought, okay, I'm going to focus my attention on education. I'm going to use my knowledge. I know that we have to think about this in a complexity mindset. Education is a complex issue, so we need to be clear about where we're playing. And if it's complex, what I knew is that there were no recipes on how to fix education and that we need significant innovation. So for those of you familiar with Theory U, Otto Scharmer's work knows that if you're faced with a really complex situation where there's no recipes and we need innovation, then there's actually a process that you can follow. And the first thing that you have to do, sorry if I can just get my slides back. Oh my goodness. So we've now run out of batteries. So does anybody have a battery for these? So it looks like the battery is flat. Oh my goodness. So now we're really giving ourselves in trouble. So I'm going to just give this to the man and find out whether he might be able to find a battery while I continue over here. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to observe, observe, observe. It's not about running into finding a solution, because many people have tried that and it's not actually worked. So with that spirit, I started to look at the reality. We have 25,000 government schools in our country, of which 5,000 of them are world-class. Umhlani is one of the examples of one of these world-class. It's a government school, but an amazing, very well functioning government school. My kids have only been to government schools. And we have 20,000 schools that are failing our children. So that's the reality. Now it's very easy for us to just look at that and look at the obvious stuff. So the obvious differences between these two sets of schools is firstly on physical infrastructure. So we know what the great schools look like, and you have many of them here in Durban. Those are both from Durban. And in those schools, kids have great classrooms, and they have IT, all of that. That's what the schools look like that are not so privileged. And we have 80 children in a class, and we have, often no lighting, bad lighting, no sanitation. That's a real picture from South Africa, recently taken in the Eastern Cape. And so the challenge is that that's where our focus goes, is in the physical stuff. And you've recently seen Angie Masheka. She said, have you seen that clip? She said, it was very sad, we're just never going to be able to fix it. We just have to live with the fact that this is just how it's going to be. Shame. I want to punch her. So my training again, and being exposed to Ben, was to say, well, what if we focused on what's strong rather than on what's wrong? What if we, instead of studying the 20,000 failing schools, which is what we do all the time, what if we studied the 5,000 well-functioning schools? Wouldn't that be a good idea? It's like you want a great marriage, but instead of, so you have some options. You can study divorce, or you can study great marriages. I mean, so in South Africa, we study divorce because we want great marriages. So I said, well, what if we just didn't do that. So there's a methodology. This is the beauty of education. This is a methodology called The Power of Positive Deviance. If anybody's interested, it's an amazing book. And it's the story of studying what's working and then fixing what's not working by doing that. So what I found is in the schools at work, there are two things that are always there, and those two things are mostly absent in the schools that don't work. So the reason I'm telling you this is because my fantasy is that there are people in this room who have something that they want to do, some issue that they want to deal with. And what I'm hoping is by sharing you our story, that something will resonate with you. So the two things that are always present in the schools that work, I love this place. They really do they have a can-do attitude at Msambiti. They fix stuff. So the first thing is that there's a school principal. It's got something to do with school principals. And secondly, it's got something to do with community. So in schools at work, we have principals who have been equipped for their task. Mshlane is a great example. That principal over many years, from being privileged herself, to going to a great school, attending a great school themselves, going to great teacher college, taught at a great school. By the time they become a principal, they know how to be a principal. They've been ready. They've been prepared for that. In 80% of the schools, and many of you in this room have now come across this, we have a principal who was a drawings teacher who suddenly gets promoted to a principal. They're a post-level 1 teacher. How dare we? I mean, it's like saying, I said to Malcolm yesterday, it's like saying that in Msambiti, because someone's been a grantsman, we can now make them the general manager. No, you're all going to be really angry if you did that. Well, we've been doing that in our schools. Nobody's getting angry. We're going, well, that's just, how things are. I think it's a human rights issue, actually, but let me not go there. So the second thing is, Umhlani. Is it Umshlati or Umshlani? Umshlali. Umshlali. In Umshlali, we have a whole community around that school. We have people who help with HR and IT and finance and sports and soccer and chess and lots of things. If you go to Shaka's Kraal, there is a lonely principal. And so we're expecting this principal who has been equipped for their task, who has the whole world supporting them, to compete with the principal who has not been equipped for their task and has no one supporting them. So I keep hearing of people who, recently someone told me 200 applications for a school governing body in one of these well-resourced schools. If I go to Shaka's Kraal and say, how many applications did you get for the school governing body? 3. Who were they? Unemployed mother, a security guard, and a cleaner who wants to get a stipend when they come to the school. Because if the first thing you do when you get your degree as a financial manager is you leave Shaka's Kraal. So the local community, but you know what? In this community, there are many people with HR and IT and finance skills. So that's the idea is, can we share? So why is this? This is so interesting. Ernest Roots from AfriForum tweeted something this week that made me so angry. He said, why do we only hear about black schools is where all the problem is? And that's, you know why? Because the white schools in these schools are built on white privilege, these well-resourced schools. And the schools that are struggling because of apartheid policies, because of Bantu education, and because of the fact that we have not been able to spend the money to fix this. So after 94, there's been no redress with regard to what happens in the well-resourced schools and the under-resourced schools, or very little. So we're back to how do we respond? We can get depressed, we can get angry, we can leave, we can wait for Superman. So that was the tagline that, But there was a movie made, Waiting for Superman, in the US. And it said, people in America know that the education system is broken and they're all sitting around waiting for Superman. And then the tagline, the punchline for that movie is, Superman is a fictional character. He's not coming. Now what? So a friend of mine, Gary Manjafiko, is a dean of a business school in Los Angeles. And he has a horrible life story. 6 children, mother who was drug dependent, kids taken away from, everything. You can't believe it. You hear the story. They lived in a room that had a curtain between them and another family, and all 6 of them were on the mattresses on the floor. But he's now the dean of this Pepperdine, a business school. So I said to Gary, how did that happen? How did you get from that background to this? He said, well, you know, there's some people who go, oh, it's horrible, poor me, it's all so horrible, the world's, like, I love, you have that attitude. He said, not that attitude. So that's one option. You can be disabled and you're kind of feeling sorry for yourself and you're in a wheelchair and poor me. And Gary says, well, that's one option. The other option is to say, it is what it is, now what? So I kind of got, if what would my it is what it is, now what response, I would need to do something. So I also looked into the future. So that's the two girls I brought back from the UK. And in 2009, there was a scenario process done called the Dinner King scenarios. And it looked at the 3 possible futures for South Africa. Walk apart, which is the road we're on at the moment. Everybody does their own thing. Some BT, Bretton Woods, all of the business in the area, Ilembe, everybody does their own thing. And they're all feeling good about themselves, and government and business and civil society, and there's no collaboration. And the outcome is by 2030, the country will burn. The other option was, that was the walk apart, which is the road we still on in many ways. The other one was walk behind, which government becomes very strong and citizens follow. Well, that's not going to happen, so we don't have to worry about that one. The other one is walk together, which is really the only possible future for our country. But it's the hardest thing for us to do because we don't know how to work together. We want to work, everybody wants to do their own thing. They all want to kind of get the brownie points. We all want to feel feel so good about themselves. Except here in Simbiti, I'm so excited with what's happening here. But my question was, how do we use this knowledge about what works to address the situation? And that might be true in your world. It's that there might be something that you know works in one area and doesn't in another. So I recently found this quote that says, are you an activist? An activist is someone who cannot help but fight for something. That person is usually not motivated by a need for power or money or fame, but in fact driven slightly mad by some injustice, some cruelty, some unfairness. So much so that he or she is compelled by some internal moral engine to act to make it better. So the question that I have for you guys, and you don't have to answer, we don't have time to have a long conversation, I would have liked to have a conversation, is what is the injustice that is driving you slightly mad? So the injustice that was driving me slightly mad, as you know by now, is this inequality. And the consequences of this inequality. So I was looking at the budget figures, and the cost of our social grants is just going up and up and up, and we do not have the money to pay for it. So where is this going to come from? How are we going to fund the reality that our kids can't read? Because if you can't read, you can't finish matric, you can't get a job, you could become grant dependent. It's just a very easy flow. Yeah, am I missing something? Are we all in agreement? This is not hard, hey guys, it's in your face. And why do we think Julius Malema has such a following? Because young men are angry. And I tell you what, if I had been in a school in Shakaskrol, where I've gone to school for 12 years, every day I went to school, and I finished my matric, and I can do nothing with it. Nobody here wants to employ me because I can't read properly. I'm going to be fucking angry. And I think I'm going to come throw some bombs, actually. Because why do you get this life and I have to live that life? I mean, how? So I don't understand why we're not seeing more bombs. I'm actually quite surprised by this. So my belief is that we must be possible to spread the wealth that's in this room. And I'm not asking for money necessarily. Money would be great, but it's not what it's about. So here's the design thinking process that we went through. We said, how can we get to 2,000 principles? Initially we said 10% of the system. We now think we need to get to more. But initially our question was, how do we get to 2,000 principles, 10% of the broken system without quick fixes? Because this quick fix mentality has to end. How do we support these principles given our resource constraints? How do we mobilize community around 2,000 principles so that schools, so that educators can feel supported and they have support in the critical issues that they need support in? How do we develop collective leadership capacity in 2,000 schools? And the answer is by spreading the wealth. So asset-based community development is another core idea. So I've given you a few. So I've brought theory U into the process. I've talked to you about positive deviance, and the other one is asset-based community development. That says, in every community there are underutilized assets. Now, I tell you, I have just been spending a few hours on this estate. there are many underutilized assets. Where's Sam? Sam, I'm going to put Sam on the spot. So Sam had a story about herself about 3 years ago that she's just a wife. And you have stuff that you were able to do. And Sam has, over the last 3 years, discovered that you have so much more to contribute. Yeah? And so for me, you are the poster child of the story. But not just you. It's all the people who have retired from work, but not from life, and have so much knowledge, so much skills, so much to offer. So my question is, how can we mobilize what's needed for our schools? Because what we need is oxygen, principals need oxygen to breathe. Many of them cannot breathe because they're so stressed, they're confronted with so much stuff. And school management team need IT skills and HR and finance and all of that stuff. Again, how do we do that? By spreading the wealth. So we also, lastly, we had to be super conscious of our content, our context. We had a long conversation with school principals to say what would be useful. And they said the following. They said, please do not adopt us. You adopt puppies and babies, not schools and principals. I'm sorry for all of you who've been adopting schools. It's just not a nice idea. You know, like, shame. Oh, shame, these black principals from Shaka Scroll. We just need to kind of go and adopt them. How does that feel? You want to kick someone? Please don't come to fix us. We don't. Can I see the school principals? Can we just acknowledge them in the room? We have some school principals. So let me check my assumption. Do you want to be fixed? No. You come with your fixing stuff, I'll kick you in the balls. Don't come to fix us. Please don't dump your old stuff on us, and then we have to feel all grateful. They said, you know what these people do, these rich people? They bring those boxes of old books, and then in the box there's some coloring in books, but half the pictures have already been colored in. Would you take that box to Umslati? No. Why are you taking it to Shaka Scroll? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but the point is, when the Shaka Scroll people say, please, can we have some of your books? Then you give the books. You don't go, we think they need your books. You're in a partnership. You need to kind of fix. And then the last thing, please imagine that you know and we don't, because that's patronizing and demeaning and it's horrible. And then the last thing, they heard me talk about this idea, this possibility of, you know, matching business leaders and principals, and they go, Louise, we get that we will get value. We get that. We, the principals, will get value. But what we want the business leaders to consider is we want them to consider the possibility that they will get something from us too. And so we've created this partnership as a reciprocal, mutually beneficial partnership. Both benefit. So because we've realized that being helpful to someone is a judgment. Because I've judged you as needing my help because you're not good enough. So how do we shift that judgmental, patronizing? I come from a family of missionaries. I have lots that I have to deal with. But how do we stop that nonsense? And how do we fund this work? And we realized we needed to do that by spreading the wealth. So here's what we've done. We've said there are business leaders, unutilized asset. And those are some of the business leaders who's involved in our program. They have knowledge, skills, experience, network, privilege, access, a sense of possibility. They have funding, they can get stuff done. And then we have school principals who have a deep knowledge about their community, domain knowledge about education, humility, resourcefulness, hospitality. And now we bring this gold dust together. We bring these amazing principals, 3 of them in the room, with the with the business leaders, and they're working together across these traditional boundaries to build our nation and increase leadership capacity in the schools and bring oxygen and bring support. And we're going to see an example of one of those in a minute. So this is slightly out of date. We're now in 833 schools, business leaders from around the country, 300 organizations. I think that was the last number. 310 organizations have come forward and said, you know, FNB and Old Mutual and Standard Bank and all, we will fund for our business leaders because we know that our business leaders learn more from doing this program than going to business school about leadership. And you can talk to Malcolm, he's been a partner. Can I just see who in the room have been a business partner to a principal? Few hands? So there are lots of people in the room. They can give you at every table, I think, there's going to be someone who can tell a story. They say I now know how to influence without authority when I don't have direct control. I've been humbled. I had no idea how difficult it is to lead an under-resourced school. I've been confronted with my own arrogance and my own racism and my own privilege. And that's hard, but you know, it will change your life when you get that, when you have that. I'm no longer sitting in the stands and criticizing from the sidelines. This is actually someone from Durban. I'm in the arena getting my hands dirty and making a difference. Every time I leave the school, I feel I've done something to build our nation. I'm no longer thinking of leaving the country. I'm more committed than ever to make South Africa work. I have hope for the future.